Okay, so now that we've thought about some potential audiences for this argument, we can start to put together our actual argument itself. So the first part of that is determining a claim, and I'm going to suggest here that you don't include your reasons in your claim. You're not writing a complete thesis statement here because this planner is only meant to get the ideas ready for the time, right? Not to have your essay actually written. It's just meant to get you thinking and have all your ideas ready to go. So, with that in mind, I've made the claim that testing is proven to be an ineffective means of measuring student success and does not improve outcomes of learning for students. That's what I'm trying to argue, and I'm not giving reasons why that's true yet. I'll get into that a little bit later. But if you include your reasons in the claim section here, the rest of this is going to be fairly confusing for you. And so I'm just suggesting right now to leave the reasons aside for the time being, because you're going to include them in just a minute. As a matter of fact, the next step is to include a strong reason. So if you think about the reason or the argument that you're making, the claim, and then add the word because, you can get at your reasons pretty easily. So testing is proven to be an ineffective means of measuring student success and does not improve outcomes of learning for students because there are any number of reasons we could give, but we want one that's going to be convincing for the intended audience. So my suggestion is that you look back at what you established as far as things that they care about and things that they believe, and try to use these as tools for deciding upon your reasoning. So I'm going to look over them, and I think probably the most convincing for the audience that I'm working with, that being the state government, is probably a combination of efficiency and money. Okay, so I'm going to say that these tests are ineffective because they are highly costly yet inefficient in achieving the ostensible goals that are set forth for them. Namely, they do not ensure improved student learning, but merely give the appearance that students are learning. In other words, you can fake it till you make it, as they say. Okay? So in other words, they're expensive, but they don't work very well. Okay? Now, potential audience objections and doubts and questions and counter-arguments. This is where you're going to try and think like your audience. You want to put yourself in the mindset of your intended audience and use that as a way of gauging what to include here. So, I think the audience, if I were to give them this reason for this claim, would have a few doubts. First of all, they would probably want to know, well, how costly are they? Okay? So it would be incumbent upon me, in other words, it's on me, so to speak, to show the cost of the test and prove that they are costly since I'm making that claim. Any claim you make, you have a certain responsibility to demonstrate and to support. And so the same is true for reasons. Now, you certainly can't deal with every possible objection that the audience is going to raise, but you'll pick the most significant ones, and I'll do that very shortly just to illustrate for you. So first of all, they want to know how costly the tests are. I think they would want to know, can the costs of testing be reduced? Okay. Why are tests, let's see, how do I want to phrase this? Why do the tests merely give the appearance that students are learning? In other words, the audience might doubt that what I have said is true, and that the tests allow students to kind of fake their way through. So it would, oops, sorry about that. It would be on me again to hopefully try and demonstrate that somewhere in my essay. Okay. So let's see, what other doubts and counter arguments might they bring in? You'll notice I'm stopping to have to do a lot of thinking here. This is usually the case. It's not very easy to think about it from a perspective of someone whose experiences you have not lived through. It's largely a matter of inference. You have to make some educated guesses about what they would want to know. Okay, so let's see. Let's say if tests do not measure learning, what are the alternatives? Because we've already established earlier on the other side that this audience is probably likely to believe that we have to measure learning in some way, and most people would agree with that. It has to be done somehow. So if we argue that tests don't work, then what do we want instead? It's not the sort of an issue where you can just brush off the alternatives, because we have to know that those don't work, or that they are not preferable to testing, or that they are in some way preferable to testing. Since I'm arguing against testing, I would want to say that the alternatives, whatever they may be, are preferable. Okay, so you can notice already I'm starting to decide what I need to deal with in my essay by looking at the potential objections and doubts and questions of the audience regarding my reasoning. Okay. I'm going to stop there for now. I simply want to give you the idea of how to do this here, and I think by this point you should have it. So under the next bullet point here, you try to respond to the audience objections and doubts and questions and counterarguments. So basically, you're doing a concession or a refutation, or simply answering any questions by providing information. So if I were to say, how costly are the tests, I would probably research this. But given that I don't want to do all of that in the midst of a video, I'm just going to say billions of taxpayer dollars. And I know that that's true, by the way, just from having seen numbers in the past. I can't recall exactly what they are, but I do know it's definitely in the billions very easily. So billions of taxpayer dollars are spent per year per state. So, I mean, multiply that by 50, you're probably talking about trillions of dollars. So billions of taxpayer dollars are spent per year per state to create, revise, and implement standardized tests like the STAR in Texas. Okay. Can the cost of testing be reduced? Probably. Most likely, the cost of testing could be reduced, but probably at the cost of their already limited effectiveness. So I might say, while expenditures for testing could likely be reduced by cutting, let's say, cutting the positions, in other words, the jobs of test creators, or by, how else could we reduce that cost? I want to make the test cheaper. Let's say, or by implementing fewer tests, or or by limiting the number of days on which the tests are administered. Any of these changes are likely to further reduce the already limited effectiveness of these tests. Okay, so again, I'm simply starting to try and deal with the problems and questions that my audience might have.